It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
And welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast, talking property, of course, 7 days a week, every day, available from 6 a.m. and available for the rest of the day, the rest of the week, the rest of the month, in fact, forever, because these are lifetime podcasts that we do produce, as heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and iHeartRadio. And the end of our working week, it is a Friday, June the 14th, as we approach next week for this all-important RBA decision. This is regarding the cash rate and what you might be paying on your monthly mortgage. The ANZ is the first Big Four banks to scrap its forecast for an interest rate cut this year, now predicting that the RBA will hold rates steady until February of next year, 2025. In a realestate.com.au piece, previously ANZ had expected a rate cut in November of this year, but now that looks to be unlikely. Head of the Australian Economics, Adam Boyton, cited persistent inflation as a key factor for the revised forecast. Recent data, which we have spoken about, shows that the Consumer Price Index exceeding expectations is delaying the return of the RBA's target until late next year. However, consequently, ANZ anticipates the first rate cut in early next year, but other major banks, including Westpac, CBA and NAB, still expect a rate cut this November. So, we'll just have to wait and see to see which way that falls. Gavin Hegney is sitting waiting patiently to talk real estate next. We were only in Perth yesterday and we find ourselves back on our Friday morning in WA. And good morning to you, Gavin. Which way do you see next week's decision from the RBA going?
Far be it from me, Craig, to go against the ANZ Bank and the major banks. I would say the next week's decision will be on hold. And I think the interesting thing about interest rates, isn't it? We all thought interest rates were going to pile the market down. It was a little bit like a fight between two, one being interest rates in one corner, population growth in the other corner. Population growth came out and knocked out interest rates in the first round, population growth driving the property market.
I did speak to David Snell about your beloved Perth property market yesterday, and there was this very interesting comment about people feeling paralysed. This is from a vendor's point of view when selling their properties, because they simply can't find a property to replace their home with. What are you seeing?
Yeah, look, I think the buying decision is always the first decision people make. And then from the buying decision, where they know what they're going to buy, they know where they're going to go, they then come back and they sell their property. So there is a logjam in the marketplace. And you understand why, because you go to a home open in a lot of areas in Perth and there's like 14, 24 people, all active bidders, actively wanting that property. So why would you sell at the moment? Because the fear of finding something else is probably too great. So people want to go and find something first, but then they're competing against cash offers. So they have to take the risk, go cash offer on what they want, and then there's very little risk in selling theirs because there's people lining up to buy. So there's not really that much risk in it.
Have you heard of people writing these letters of, we think your property is fantastic and we'd love to be the purchaser, and they cite a whole list of reasons why they would love to buy that property? It's something I'd never heard of before, but David was telling us that yesterday morning. Have you heard about that?
Actually, a guy rang me last week and he's been trying to buy a property and he's missed out so many times and he's sold his property. So he's panicking. He looked in the suburb that he wanted to buy. He looked at all the properties that haven't changed hands for the last 10 years. He wrote handwritten letters to them, dropped them in their letterboxes. He got 2 responses and now he's actually ended up buying one of those properties. He's done his own groundwork and found that. I don't know why the agents wouldn't have found that. I don't, perhaps people felt compassion because he was looking for a home for his family and it worked that way, but it worked.
Yeah, well, I did say yesterday, I mean, what have you got to lose? You don't have anything to lose, so you might as well do it. And the proof is right there with what you've just said. Hey, don't forget, if you've got a suggestion or comment as you listen to us this morning, our email is myrealestatepodcast@gmail.com. You can join in on the conversation. And Gavin, Perth, Brisbane and Adelaide recorded the strongest price growth in May. We've talked about it in keeping with the trend pretty much seen for much of the past 2 years. These markets do remain the strongest for annual growth, with, of course, Perth prices up 20.58% over the past year. And that coming from PropTrack. And it's pretty eye-watering, really, just in terms of it's still moving forward.
Yeah, and a lot of it's only really playing catch-up, Craig. You know, we probably, if we went back sort of 1.5 years, we were 28% undervalued. We were sitting there at about 6th highest in Australia. We should normally be in Perth about 4th highest in Australia. We're only getting back to that spot now. We're probably still 8% off that spot. So, but when interestingly, as a converse, when the GFC hit, we were equal highest housing price in Australia, equal to Sydney. So we didn't fare that well after the GFC for the next 8 years or so. So look, every state has a bit of a surge. It tends to come back in, revert to the mean in the end of the day. Perth normally, or Western Australia normally sits about 4th highest in Australia. We're sort of coming back into that alignment. We'll probably overshoot on the way through, as it typically happens at any cycle, but we're still not into overvalued and overshooting territory. So, we've probably got another 8%, maybe 10% to get before we start to overshoot.
Yes, and talking of overshooting, coming up next, we're going to be talking about a couple of suburbs that are at polar differences. We're going to be talking about Cottesloe and another suburb. We'll do that after this.
Let's explore together the power of real estate. We keep you better informed and updated.
So that's the challenge for real estate agents now, is to secure good quality stock, or indeed any stock. Every product that hits the market, we've got 40 or 50 active buyers. I'm not talking about people coming to the home open. I'm talking about people that are just about prepared to put an offer on that as soon as it hits the market.
Yeah, so 8 days on market. I mean, that's terrific, isn't it? I mean, just over a week, the property is sold. Do you think there's any mixed messages in the market of Perth at the moment for that very reason that is stopping vendors from listing and moving on?
No, spot on, Craig. We're talking about people that are living in their own home. They are paralysed. You are spot on. So we could triple what's coming on the market if they could find something. That's typically what they say to us. So even going and renting a property is very, very difficult.
Every week we present so much real estate. Powerful, up-to-date news every morning from 6 a.m. Know your property with us.
And it is a Real Estate Friday. Yeah, looking forward to another weekend coming up right across Australia. No doubt another very busy weekend if you are entangled with trying to find yourself a property. And we are in Perth this morning talking with Gavin, who is right across the Perth property spectrum. And Gavin, I want to just highlight Cottesloe. Having a look at the median price now, it sits at just over 3.2 million for houses, 822,000 and change for units, and the median rent $1,200 for a house and $620 for units. Now that area has just kept on growing.
Yeah. Look, if you went back probably 2 to 3 years, Cottesloe was the epicenter of the boom. And it showed up in Cottesloe first, and then from there moved to the other surrounding upmarket suburbs. Today, it probably sits in the lower end of the market. But in Cottesloe, you've had just people with balance sheets of 2, 3, 400 million, billions in some instances. And so to put 10 or 15 million into a property, it's not a big difference between 10 and 15. And so the prices very quickly moved sort of from 2 to 3 million to 3 to 4 million. And all of a sudden, going from 2 to 4, it's doubled in value. But it's still a very small percentage of the balance sheet of the people driving the market who were buying the prime properties, which there's not a high supply of. So that's all. You always get a breakout price, and then it revalues the suburb, and that suburb revalues the next suburb and that. But Cottesloe was the epicenter of this boom.
The epicentre, well, if we go from Cottesloe to Gosnells, and that is painting a little bit of a different story for the Perth property market. Median price in Gosnells is $440,000 for houses, around $310,000 for units. Median rent $460 per week for a house and $400 for a unit. Actually, maybe there's a few people saying, gee, I wouldn't mind having a look at those rentals, given, we're in such a tight supply, but a different face of the real estate market when you compare those two postal codes.
Yeah, well, it probably takes half an hour to drive from Cottesloe to Gosnells, but it took about 2 years for the property market to move from Cottesloe to Gosnells. So today in Gosnells, it's been red hot. And if you look at the top 10 performing suburbs in the last 2 years in Australia, you'll find 9 of them in Western Australia and one of them being Gosnells. So Gosnells has moved from probably the 350s up to the 550s mark now. It's certainly had a very, very strong run. It typically, 80-style homes, large blocks, but probably had a lot of its run. I don't know if it's a place you'd step into today. I think it's a place that's probably had its run, but there are other areas that can have their run. But Gosnells, alongside Armidale, 2 of the top performing suburbs in the last 1 and 2 years in Australia, not only in Perth, in Australia.
And the active first home buyers, how active and what are you seeing?
Yeah, well, I think that's why you're seeing the lower end running so strong now in Perth, not only because the vacancy rate's sort of around 0.4% and very tight, rents rising at 15% per annum, but the new demand into the market, which is always what you've got to watch when you're looking at values moving. We're about 31% first home buyers, 35% investors. So 2/3 of the new demand in the market is being pushed into the lower end of the market, and places like Gosnells have benefited. Whereas, if you and I are selling homes to each other, it's a zero-sum game, but the new demand is the one that drives prices. And first home buyers very active, and relatively speaking, relative to rents, because the yields are so high, it's almost in a lot of areas still cheaper to buy than to rent. So hence, you're going to see a bit more running in the lower end of the market in Perth.
And what about the buyers in terms of where they're coming from? Are you still seeing some interstate movements coming into the Perth market from your perspective?
Yeah, it's really interesting actually, because we are still seeing eastern states buyers, Melbourne, Sydney buyers, investors coming in. And we have seen that for the last 2 years. And we saw it in 2003. And then what we saw was the opportunities were spotted from outside of Western Australia first, caught the locals napping, prices ramped, and then the locals caught onto it. And the same thing's happening here. So, eastern states investors came in 2 years ago, still actively in the market, but they'll probably move on, I would have thought. And where will they go? They'll probably move to Melbourne, my guess would be the next one. But from here, they have driven the lower end of the market, have bought up a lot of property, helping with putting a few more rentals on the market as they're buying off homeowner occupiers and putting on the rental market. So that's softened the rental market a touch, but we're only talking a touch, not a lot. The floating investor, they'll move, and they'll move to another state. Perth's probably not done yet. There's probably still some more growth left in the market, but they'll start to look elsewhere and where's the next Perth, and they'll find it and they'll move there.
All right, well, we'll leave it there, Gavin. Good to catch up with you and find out what your thoughts are regarding the Perth property market, and enjoy your weekend as well.
Thank you very much, Craig.
Gain insights with exclusive conversations from real estate professionals about buying, selling and investing across Australia. We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.